On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Oklahoma City Thunder boat race the Toronto Raptors in a game up north. How did the Thunder pull off this dominating win? We'll discuss it all.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Ryland Styles. Follow me on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder blitzing the Toronto Raptors. Isaiah Joe went off in this game as a starter. SGA launched threes. The defense was elite, and Isaiah Hartenstein is still making Thunder fans smitten. We're joined today by Brandon Barr on Twitter, dailythunder.com, 1077 The Franchise, KREF, everywhere in the world. We should have a new game called Where in the World is Brandon Barr? Brandon, how you doing today?
I am good, Ryland. What an intro. I appreciate that. And I'm right here. Of all the places I could be, I would not want to be anywhere else but here with you, Ryland.
I really appreciate that.
Great game.
It was a fantastic game. It was certainly a basketball game that the Thunder were able to win. Brandon, let's start with just the overall game, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty here. The Thunder win 129-92. One lead change, one tie. It was a wire-to-wire just domination for the Thunder, who once grew a 39-point lead in this game. The Thunder have stuck to a similar formula. Like whenever they've been at their best with Hartenstein, he's gotten them to break even or better on the glass. Tonight, it was only a 2 rebound differential between the Thunder and Raptors. And because you now have a presence, and it's not just Hartenstein, the rest of this roster, like Cason Wallace and Isaiah Joe, and their philosophy of tapping the rebounds back out to their perimeter, like the Thunder themselves have changed a lot, not just Hartenstein, but clearly Hartenstein's 16 rebounds is a big part of it. Like the fact that they can now draw even on the glass creates this dynamic where they can continue to blow out teams, because you're only 2 rebounds shy in the rebound category, but you win the turnover battle 19-6. They have caused more turnovers and has more steals than they have their own turnovers this season so far, which is unheard of. So the Thunder's defense really allowed them to get out and run in fast break, where they outscored the Raptors 31 points to 15, which the Raptors, one of the best, if not the best, fast break teams in the league to this point. So a really high mark there. Brandon, what did you think about just this look of the Thunder's defense tonight?
Yeah, this Thunder defense, to your point, turning the ball over so many times, forcing turnovers, it's just giving the Thunder so many more opportunities to score on the other end than their opponents. I mean, when you turn the ball over that much, one, the fast break points, and this is a young, fast, athletic team that finishes well on these fast breaks. You got so many finishes. Like you think of like Cason Wallace and his steal and fast break dunk tonight. We've seen it from J-Dub over and over. It seems like J-Dub gets one of those or 2 of those a game. Shai does it. So they're easy points. And, we're coming off a season high in steals. They had another 14 steals tonight. They had 11 blocks tonight. So stocks all over the place. You look at like the top 10 steal leaders in the NBA. The Thunder have 3 of them in J-Dub, SGA, and Cason Wallace. You get Alex Caruso back tonight. They're doing this right now without Chet Holmgren. So this Thunder defense has been elite all season, and they did it in like different versions of themselves. They did it with the Chet version without iHeart. They did it in that little 6-game sample of J-Dub's small ball center without Chet or iHeart. Now they're doing it without Chet, but with iHeart. And at some point, we'll get to see this team, hopefully, with Chet and iHeart and all these elements coming together. And I don't know how this defense can get better, but it can, because you're adding a guy who is in the running for Defensive Player of the Year before he got hurt.
It can get better in a lot of different ways, too. Everyone wants to talk about and focus on Chet and Hartenstein playing together, which I think that you've seen from Hartenstein how those two could coexist better than some thought over the summertime whenever you hadn't seen just how Hartenstein plays in this system. But also, they get better just even if they don't play them together. Like even if the plan is to start Holmgren and bring Hartenstein off the bench, but now that you have 48 minutes worth of rim protection that you've never had before, like the Thunder have been a top defensive team for the large majority of Mark's career, even back when they were losing, even last year. They've never been able to blanket a game with rim protection, and now you can do that, much less the different wrinkles that you can do, where you can have Jade up at the three next to Chet and Hartenstein, and now you're a jumbo team after being Lamine last year for how small you were. Now you can go supersized, or you can still lean back into your small ball nature to throw teams off with a curveball. Like you just give yourself, as Mark would put it, another pitch to use, another tool in the toolbox, and it's just going to look much of the same, where you are a dominant team so long as Chet Holmgren can come back as they expect and be healthy and be a good player. But I thought that the defense tonight was some of their best. Obviously, this is one of their worst teams that they've played. It's one of the only Eastern Conference teams that they've played. The Raptors are not good, although I think that the Raptors are similar to how the Thunder were under Mark, where, yeah, they're going to only win 20-something games this year, but it doesn't show tonight. But if you go back and look, they really compete night in and night out, and they really are a team that you can start to see building, for the future and for what they want out of this group moving forward. So I just think that this is an impressive win to just go out there and impose your will on a team on the road, and it really started with their physicality defensively.
Yeah, this Raptors team I think is better than the record because a big portion of their losing record was without Scotty Barnes. He was hurt, and since he's come back, they've had a winning record, and they've been much, much better. So, yeah, I don't think this is just a deal where you look at the Raptors like, oh, terrible team. Yeah, of course they're going to boat race this team. I think they're better than the record indicates. I think still, though, the Thunder just outclassed them from a talent perspective. I think you're absolutely right. They fight. The effort is there every night. They're just a young team. They're going to get better, and they're going to improve, and they're going to add more talent around Scotty Barnes and Barrett and all these guys. So just an impressive win, though, from the Thunder. Like, I think what this game just hammers home, and we've seen it from this Thunder team since the beginning of Daigneault's, his time here, they don't take any games off. They don't take any games lightly. When you're a contender, when you're a number one seed, when you're coming off a season where you won 57 games, usually in the NBA, teams will take nights off. They'll look at like, oh, it's the Raptors, look at the record, and they'll kind of take their gas off the pedal, and maybe a game gets closer than it should be. We've seen this in past Thunder eras, where there's some games where you kind of play down to the competition. This Thunder team just doesn't tend to do that. We've heard the players talk about it. It's like a mindset. And they say there is NBA talent over there. They can beat anybody any given night. So they take every team seriously. And that's what the Thunder did. Like, you see the competitiveness tonight from the Thunder, like all the steals, their hands are everywhere. They're in pass lanes. They're fighting for boards. Even when it was a 10-point lead, a 20-point lead, a 30-point lead, they're still doing that. They take every game seriously. And I think that's what tonight showed me. It just hammered that point home even more so, because the Thunder haven't had a lot of, quote unquote, easier games this season so far. So this is one of the ones they've had, and this and the Jazz game, they took them very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, they've had some blowouts this year, but it's not because it was supposed to be a blowout on paper the way that these last two games were. And to your point, like, you had Kenrich Williams down there nearly to the buzzer, getting steals, getting out on transition and having his own put back. Like that type of hustle play, I know his name is Kenny Hustle, but when you're up there in age comparatively to this roster, of course, Kenny, you're still a young man, but when you're up there in age and you're in the middle of a blowout on a Thursday night in December, most of the time around this league, especially in Adam Silver's NBA, you're not getting that certain effort level, which is why, you watch this team, even after all that they've dealt with so many injuries and so many situations, like from the Caruso situation where he's in and out of the lineup to, of course, Chet being the highlight of these examples, where you just wonder, like, is this where we need to start to recalibrate what to expect from this team? And the answer is no. This team is still going to be the one seed in the West. This team is still a title contender, and reinforcements, if all goes as plans, are on the way even before you mention anything external.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, this team is going to get better is what's wild, because you're not just missing a piece. You're missing an elite piece of like an all-star. Like, Chet was on an all-star track. He was like in Defensive Player of the Year discussion, as we said, All-Star track, and a piece of the puzzle that unlocks everything else because he's 7'1" and he can space the floor and he can block shots. And to your point earlier, having a 7-foot rim protector on the court, 48 minutes. There's just so much that Chet brings to the table. And as good as this team looks right now, this team could be really, really good. And right now they look like the class of the West. Like, to me, it looks like right now it's the Thunder and the Mavs, and then everybody else is kind of fighting for the other 4 guaranteed spots. Like, you can argue the Rockets, the Suns, the Grizzlies, the Lakers, the Warriors, whoever. I don't know if you can argue the Lakers right now. You can argue a lot of teams, but I think right now the Thunder and Mavs look like the class of the West, and the Thunder are going to get significantly better when Chet comes back.
Coming up, let's dive into the ins and outs of this game, including Isaiah Joe having his best game to date as a starter. But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at Robinhood, go check out Robinhood today, because with Robinhood Gold, you do not need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows you, and it offers you these rates and perks that usually are reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn a very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account contributions. So Robinhood Gold provides you the privilege of the high net worth from any net worth. These generous benefits can now be available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here at Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhoodgold.com/gold. Terms and conditions apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investment involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is now offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. So go check out robinhood.com/gold today. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day, here at Brenner Bar, at Brenner Bar on Twitter, dailythunder.com, 1077 The Franchise, OKC Dream Team, which we just got done recording after this game. So a little double dip action here to talk this beautiful game where Grady Dick was large and in charge, stroking it from beyond the arc. Speaking of stroking it, Isaiah Joe, I think he really beat Dick in the box score. Really, I think that he did a great job of going into that heads-up sharpshooter matchup and beating Dick off the floor. Whenever you look at Isaiah Joe in the starting 5, this has been a situation that you and I have discussed, and that we've kind of discussed how you have this rotation of Joe, Wiggins, Wallace, and you cycle through these guys really not at random, because there has been a little bit of a pattern to it, similar to like a starting rotation in baseball. But those are the guys that kind of flip through around the core 4, which is now Hartenstein in place of Holmgren as the lone big. But the last 3 games entering this one, it had been Kaysen starting. And you look at Isaiah Joe's splits from when he's on the bench to when he's in the starting lineup, he is a way more productive offensive player off the bench than he is in the starting 5. And now he's still been a positive contributor in the starting 5, because you have to respect his shooting gravity, because he's made himself an average to above average defender, and because he's improved his playmaking. But he's way more productive in terms of like the loud points and the scoring that you need from him off the bench. So whenever his name was on the starting lineup sheet tonight, it was a bit peculiar. But he comes out and in 20 minutes goes 6 for 10, 4 for 6 from 3. He had 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block, plus 15 on 16 points. He scored the first 5 points of the night. What did you like from Isaiah Joe and really his first game catching a rhythm with the starters?
Yeah, what I liked about him was all the things that you just said. Is like he impacted the game in so many other areas other than just 3-point shooting. Like a lot of times you'll look at 3-point quote unquote specialists. I don't think Isaiah Joe is. He's become so much more than that. And I feel like the 76ers and what they're going through right now, not to kick them while they're down, but they just got to look at Isaiah Joe and feel like he's the one that got away. Because you look on the other side, like you mentioned, Grady Dick, and you know, he scored 15 points, but he had 1 rebound, 0 assists. And Isaiah Joe, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. He's impacting the games in other ways. And he's not just taking 3-pointers. He had a couple mid-range shots. We've seen him. He'll go in and he'll posterize somebody like he did against the Jazz. I just think that Isaiah is becoming a better and better player. Like maybe when he first came to the Thunder, it was like, okay, he's the 3-point guy. And you see his shooting and you just feel like he's the 3-point guy. But I just feel like he's so much more than that. And yeah, in the starting unit, because of his spacing, because of the spacing he can provide for Shai and for Dub to drive, and then the outlet that he provides, plus the 2-man game that we're already seeing with Joe and Hartenstein. Like Hartenstein loves to set up a dribble handoff and set a screen for Joe, like all in one motion, and Joe will take that shot. And we're seeing that more and more. So they have a developing chemistry. So yeah, Joe, I just think is becoming so much more than just a 3-point shooter.
And I think that a game like this is why you love having a coach like Mark if you're the Thunder organization, because he understands how to pick his spots. And I don't want to speak for him, so I want to be clear, this is just speculation. But I look at the last 3 games where it was Case and Wallace starting, and it felt like these were pretty cut and dry decisions in the sense of we've talked about how Isaiah Joe and Wiggins maximize that bench unit in must-win games because Wiggins can get to his spots unlike anyone else off the bench, and Joe is just a more productive shooter off the bench, and some players are just more comfortable off the bench. We see it all the time around the NBA of like people's having these jarring splits. Isaiah Joe, to this point, is one of them. So whenever you had to go on the road and take on LA, take on Golden State, take on Houston, take on Utah, like you started casing way more often than not, including Golden State, Lakers, and the Jazz. And the Jazz are a bad team, but it was a must-win game for their NBA Cup life, which, despite playing coy, I think that ultimately they do care about. So that you had to go win that game Tuesday to give you a chance to have a fantastic week next week where you're going to get a lot of benefit from playing the Mavericks again. You're going to get a lot of benefit from playing the Rockets or the Warriors, like really testing your mettle before December. And in a game like Toronto, not to say that you're going to play with your food, but you understand that, hey, Isaiah Joe's not like some, just pit, right? Like he's not going to be a -12 if we start him. At the worst, he'll be a +7 instead of a +12, right? So like we're still going to be able to get off to a hot start. Let's give him another chance here as he's grown with Hartenstein in that 2-man game, and as he's become more functional off of that, as these are 2 guys trying to get on the same page. And they gave him another chance, and maybe this can be something that sparks him, because I think when you look at that 5-man lineup, whether it's in the starting unit or whether it's just in the middle of the third quarter, whenever you want to deploy this 5-man lineup, and that, or at least the lineup that includes Hartenstein, Joe, plus Shai and J-Dub, it makes all the sense in the world on paper. Like it just is a dream come true because of the shooting spacing for Shai, because of what Hartenstein can set up for Joe away from the ball and on the ball, as you mentioned, with the DHOs and everything else. It just seems like it's the perfect pairing. So why not go back to it? Whereas I think that most coaches would stubbornly just throw their hands up at this point in the season and say the rest of the way it's Casey in the starting 5. His willingness to be flexible, I think, is a good thing, even if at times it kind of looks like it should be a black and white decision. I wonder how it'll look on Tuesday. Look, whenever you face a team that is a must-win game for your NBA Cup life and that has had your number and that you need to get off to a good start against, who draws the start there. But credit to Mark for going back to Joe, because he clearly deserved it. And I think that they found a way to get him in a rhythm. I don't know if this was by design or not. I'd be curious to see if anybody asked him after the game. But Isaiah Joe, scoring the first 5 points on actions designed for him, like, was that a way to get a player who, when he comes in off the bench, like, he's one of the best scorers in the lineup because you've taken some guys off the floor. So he's getting touches immediately off the bench. Whereas when he's with the starters, you have a very willing shooter in Lou Dort. You, of course, know about Shai and J-Dub touches, and then you know how you can use Hartenstein as a safety valve. You've really pushed him down that totem pole of touches. And so if you're used to almost immediate attempts, and then you go in the starting lineup and you might just be used as kind of not a decoy, but as a guy who's not getting the attempts right away, perhaps starting with him early allowed him to have this game, or maybe it had nothing to do with it. But I'm just very curious to see what starting Isaiah Joe looks like moving forward.
Yeah, and I think he's such a great ceiling raiser too as a starter, because he can get hot, and because, if he bombs a few threes right away, like, you get that momentum from the very beginning, and then you give defenses who are already worried about Shai and J-Dub, give them another thing to worry about with Isaiah Joe's shooting and having to get some attention there. I do think he's a big ceiling raiser. Plus, you're adding so much size by bringing Hartenstein in and starting him. So, Isaiah Joe's, one of the smaller players on the Thunder roster, probably is the smallest player on the Thunder roster. So, but you bring in the size with Hartenstein, so
Adam
the fit
Flagler's
makes
on the
sense.
roster. No offense to Flagler.
Good point.
He's
Good point.
shorter.
That's true.
I would wonder who would be more muscular, but Adam Flagler I think would be smaller.
Yeah, that's a good call.
So
I like the pairing. So what?
My goat, Adam Flagler, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I like the pairing there. I like the developing chemistry. I do think that he's a great ceiling raiser. Like starting Joe, it just raises the ceiling. And I'm with you. I'm really curious. That Mavs game on Tuesday is going to be the most important game of the season so far. So I'm really curious to see what the starting lineup looks like that night. If it's going to be Wallace or Joe, if it's a curveball and it's Wiggins, it'll be one of the three.
Finally getting that elimination game against Dallas in OKC. We'll see how they handle it on Tuesday. Coming up, Hartenstein's impact is still fresh in everybody's mind and still at the top of everyone's hearts in Oklahoma City as he had another great game. SGA launched triples. Was it a good thing? Was it an indifferent thing? What did it look like? We'll talk about all that coming up. But first, I want to say right now, my good friends over at FanDuel, go check out FanDuel today. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Go to the FanDuel Sportsbook app today and get everything you need to bet on live lines, on the NFL, spreads, player props, over-unders, all in one place. Go check it out today at FanDuel.com. Join today to get started. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. You can get $150 in bonus bets on your first $5 bet. If you're only into the NBA, no worries. Not only do I have you covered for a Thunder NSI betting column for every Thunder game, but you can bet on the NBA with FanDuel. Go check out FanDuel today, where the Thunder and Mavericks line for Tuesday is already out. So it's one of those forecasted lines where the Thunder are 5-point favorites at home against Dallas. So if you're feeling good one way or the other, go check it out at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day, here with Brandon O'Barr to wrap up the show. Let's first talk about SGA. I thought SGA was really good tonight. I thought that he had a perfect mix of, yes, there were shots that it felt watching it was like a nod to, hey, playing in Canada, playing Toronto, Drake's courtside. Like I want to do something big here, and I guess you can call that pressing, but it's tough because I thought he balanced it so well to deem this as a pressing game from Shai, where he really wanted to go score a ton of points, and he did. He scored 30. He got 30 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds. But the reason I hesitate with a block and 2 steals, the reason I hesitate to call this a pressing game from Shai was that, yes, he went 1 for 10 from 3. He still shot 50% from the floor. He got to the rim at will. He scored inside the arc at will, 7 for 8 from the charity stripe. And the 1 for 10 from 3, I just think if you're upset about that, it really lacks, foresight of what they're trying to do. You saw all last year when teams are committed defensively, which they are in the playoffs, it's not so easy to get downhill. It's not so easy to get to the rim. You need to be able to expand your game beyond the arc. And this has been a constant message from the Thunder, from coaches to players to Shai himself, of wanting to up his three-point volume. Same with J-Dub and Wiggins. Those were like the primary names that talked about it, along with Mark as the team-wide aspect of it, that they want to shoot more threes. This was a team that led the NBA in three-point percentage last year, but they were below average in terms of attempts per game. I think they were 16th per game last year in attempts. So even if your percentages dip a little bit, if you're taking more of them, you're scoring more points, and you're really allowing your offense to thrive, which was already a top 5 offense. But you saw how different it looked in the playoffs. So to become a better three-point shooter, you've got to shoot some in the game. And were some of these ill-advised? Sure. But what's better way to learn than doing it in the game, watching it on film tomorrow, and adjusting accordingly? Like, this is what development is all about. And so me personally, I would rather see Shai in a game in which you had control of. And we talked ad nauseum for the first 2 segments about how dominating this win was for the Thunder. You had full control of this game. I'd rather see him in this game shoot 50% from the floor instead of 65% from the floor, even if it hurts his MVP chances or hurts whatever social media agendas there are out there. Shoot more threes, get better at that, because in the long run, that's how you win a championship, is by Shai becoming a better shooter.
Yeah, ultimately, he still scored 30 points on 22 shots, 50%, like you said. So it's still an efficient night. And he did this in 3 quarters. Like he scored 30 in 3 quarters. And to your point, I do think some of this was being at home in Toronto, Drake courtside, just trying to put on a show. And like you said, this game was not in doubt. This game was a blowout, and it was very apparent. The Raptors scored the first bucket of the game. Then the Thunder scored the next 13 points. And it was like completely obvious that this was going to be a game where the Thunder were up big. So Thunder, so SGA shot some threes. Maybe he doesn't normally shoot. And if a few of those go in, that looks completely different. Maybe he's got a 40.9, a 45.9 in his homecoming with Drake courtside. So I get it. And he still put on a show. I think he was still great. And if you can be great in 3 quarters and still go 1 for 10, I mean, come on. If that's the biggest complaint, things are pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if you can still shoot 50% from the floor while going 1 for 10 from 3, I'd be curious to look up how often that's happened. I know Daniel Bell is our basketball reference guy. I need to text him real quick and ask him how many times that's happened, because that just is alarming of how good that is for Shai. Moving on from Shai, because he was just excellent as always. And I think defensively, he showed you that he's really made strides since he's been in Oklahoma City as a defender. This whole team, J-Dub is an all defensive player right now. I'm not sure he's going to get the hype for it. I'm not sure he's going to get the votes for it, but the caliber of defender he is, if you were going to grade it, you would grade it at all defensive level from Jalen Williams. And what's crazy is, because this team is so good, it's kind of lost behind how good Hartenstein, Holmgren, Dort, Kaysen, Caruso have all been defensively. But there's been J-Dub right there playing at an all defensive level as well. Speaking of Caruso, he did return tonight, 17 minutes for him, 2 for 3 shooting. I thought he looked more comfortable offensively, kind of picking up where he left off before the injury. 8 points, was a +6, and was really good on the defensive end as well. So shout out to Alex Caruso. I think that this is a perfect timing where you get him back Toronto, presumably get him back against New Orleans as well. 2 little ramp-up games, if you will, before a must-win, high-intensity game against Dallas.
Yeah, the timing is perfect, because you don't want to have his first game be in this most important game of the year, NBA Cup trip to Vegas, on the line against the Mavs. So it's really nice for Caruso that you get 2 games, and 2 games that the Thunder, should win fairly comfortably. Raptors tonight, and then the Pelicans in New Orleans on Saturday. So Caruso should be, back in his normal game shape come Tuesday. This team, they don't have Chet Holmgren, but besides that, they're kind of firing on all cylinders right now. So I'm really excited to see who I think are the 2 best teams in the West, and the Thunder and the Mavs. And I think whoever wins this game on Tuesday is going to ultimately represent the West in the NBA Cup Finals. So, and I think Caruso, when you're playing Luka and Kyrie, and most importantly, PJ Washington, it's really nice to have Caruso back to go along with Dort and Wallace and J-Dub and Shai to throw at these elite scorers on the perimeter, to have all the guys to throw at him. So really, really good to have Caruso back.
Let's look at Isaiah Hartenstein, who in this game had 16 rebounds, 6 assists, a steal, a block, 2 points, +15 with 2 points on his docket offensively. But man, the size from Hartenstein is just so noticeable of an addition for OKC. And it's not size at the cost of play style. And I think that is where people might get confused a bit of like, see, this is why that we were saying all last year that they had to go get more size. They could have gone and got, bigger players last year and thus had more size. It would not have been functional size. There's less than a handful of guys who can provide you with the ability to grab 16 rebounds and dominate on the glass, box out multiple players at a time, wipe away guys on screens, and do this kind of dirty work, bruising work as a big, while also not sacrificing even 1% of how you want to play this versatile playmaking, free-flowing style on both ends. Hartenstein is one of the very few and the proud guys who can do that on this roster and in this league. And so I just think that Hartenstein has been such a huge addition to this team. And I know that it sucks that Holmgren's not playing. I think that the conversation in terms of expectations, in terms of how good can this Thunder team be, how good can this Thunder defense be, like I think that none of that changes until the postseason. Like if you just have to write it out with Hartenstein, you're going to still be the 1 seed. You're going to still be an all-time really high-level defensive team. You're still going to get a ton of blowout wins. Like he is that good. And once you have Chet back, it'll be just it's hard to fathom how good it'll be whenever you have Chet back. But I just think that it's another feather in the cap of Sam Presti where he was patient. He didn't panic. He waited around to free agency, went and got the biggest free agent in franchise history, both literally and figuratively. And it was the perfect fit because he's not just a big guy. He's a Thunder player who is also a very large human.
Yeah, he's such a unique player because you don't usually see a guy with this size and physicality, one, be that great of a passer, but then also to kind of have he's really, I wouldn't say finesse, but he's got this weird combination of physicality and strength and size to go along with kind of a finesse game, like his floater, his passing, like the way that he can kind of position himself for boards and use his quickness and his hops. He's just a very, very unique player, and he's impacting the team on both sides. He kind of reminded me tonight of Lou Dort the other night when Lou scored 0 points, but he led the team in plus minus in a game because he had such a big impact. I think it was against the Kings, and he shut De'Aaron Fox down and he didn't score, but his impact was very obvious. I think that was Hartenstein tonight on the boards and with his playmaking. He only scored 2 points, but he felt like he was everywhere. And that is, like, to your point, a Thunder player. He just happens to be everything that the Thunder needed. And especially now with Chet out, like, because you don't skip a beat. Like, you went from Chet to Hartenstein, these are two, I don't know how you want to rank them, like a top 5 center and a top 10 center, however you want to rank them, top 12, whatever you want to say. But they're two of the best bigs in the league, and the Thunder just happen to have both of them on the same roster.
How different a year is, huh? Like now you've got 2 top 10 bigs. Last year you were hunting and pecking for a second big man, period, much less of this caliber. But this has been an awesome game. Brandon, I really appreciate you double dipping here today. Go check out OKC Dream Team for me and Brandon. Also, of course, Locked On Thunder, dailythunder.com, Thunder on SI, 1077 The Franchise. Brandon, any final thoughts on this game that you want to let out, or thoughts in general?
On this game, I think it's funny that J-Dub's now at the point where he can score 20 points, and like we don't even mention, like, he's just like we mentioned his defense because his defense is excellent and overlooked. And then I think Kenrich Williams needs a shout out because he was great tonight. He scored 13 points in 13 minutes, 3 of 3 from 3. And then one last shout out, AJ Mitchell. I thought he was great off the bench as well. He went 6 of 9 from the field, which was really nice.
I thought this was the best defensive game from AJ Mitchell, which is saying a lot because it's not like he's been a turnstile out there. Like, he's been a quality defender from the word go, but man, tonight was he just extra physical, extra special on that end, and it led to the success that he and the Thunder had today. Brandon, thanks again for joining us, and until the game after the night after the Pelicans game, where we recap that game, be good and be good to one another.